You're listening to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast. Here's your host, Gary Durbin.
Welcome to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast, where we talk about worship ministry in the local church. Today with me is Mac Lake. Mac has been in ministry for over 30 years in different pastoral and consultant roles. He's a husband, dad, grandpa, author, and passionate about leadership development. So Mac, welcome back to the podcast.
Gary, great to be with you again. Always enjoy connecting with you, man. I appreciate your heart for ministry and appreciate your heart for worship leaders, especially.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. And I appreciate your heart for what you do as well. I've benefited from it already just in conversation and reading your book. And so I appreciate you taking the time today. So how was 2024? How did it shape out for you near the end and as you're going into the new year?
Yeah, very good. Very good. Yeah. Man, we've had a great year, worked with probably close to around 100 churches. And surprisingly enough, this year, God sort of opened the door where we began to work with businesses, coaching them as well. So what we do is we help organizations build intentional leadership development strategy to help them build more and better leaders. And so doors keep opening because at least in church world, surveys show that leadership development is the number one challenge that churches face. And surveys have shown that for year after year after year. And so we're trying to bring solution to that. It's funny, Gary, when you ask a pastor, hey, what's the leadership development strategy of your church? They're going to look at you and they're going to go, well, we don't have one. Or they're going to say, well, ours is organic, which means they don't have one. And so it's been a joy this past year to come along some great churches and help them build out an intentional leadership development strategy. I got a text just yesterday from one of the guys. And he was like, oh my gosh, thank you, thank you, thank you. We are seeing so many leaders reproduced in our church. It's exciting to not have that shortage anymore, and so not just have more leaders, but you want to make your existing leaders better. And that's just a passion of mine. And so I love what I get to do.
Yeah. And I love that you include leadership development in the idea of discipleship. I've always loved that as I've read your stuff and listened to you. So that's great stuff. Talk about your Multiply group. There's some great stuff happening in 2025.
Yeah. We just kicked off a brand new community called Multipliers Community. So with Multiply Group, we have a lot of coaches now that deliver the leadership pipeline training. And so for 2025, I decided to pivot some of my time because I'm doing less of that direct coaching. And I decided to pivot my time and build this Multipliers community where I meet every week and do coaching with people who are just passionate about discipleship and leadership development. And we got business people in the group. We got pastors in the group. We've got nonprofit leaders in the group. We just a variety of people. And so I'm 63. So for the rest of my life, what I want to do, I want to invest my time in creating what I call super multipliers. And a super multiplier is somebody that develops a leader, that develops a leader, that develops a leader, that 2 Timothy 2:2 concept. To where a super multiplier creates a ripple effect that goes 4 generations deep. And so I did in this community, we just kicked it off a few weeks ago. So I taught about what a super multiplier is and how you have to have shift in your thinking to become a super multiplier. Because most people are not doing leadership development. If they are, they're only doing addition, not multiplication. So they're adding new leaders, but they're not developing developers. They're not developing leaders that reproduce themselves. And so I shared in that call with my community, I shared Bill Walsh's story where he was under a coach at Cincinnati Bengals as a young man, and they was promised the head coach role. And when it came time for Coach Brown to resign, they didn't hire Bill Walsh. In fact, they badmouthed Bill Walsh and they sort of, gave him a bad reputation. And so he ended up at the advice of a friend, he went to Sanford, and there he decided, you know what? I'm not going to treat my coaches the way I was treated. I'm going to pour into them. I'm going to develop them. I'm going to elevate them. I'm going to raise them up. And And if you Google search this, you can find Bill Walsh's coaching tree. It's phenomenal. It's got his picture in the middle, the coaches that spawned off of him, the coaches that spawned off of them, and so and the ones that spawned off of them. So 4 generations deep. And so I gave everybody in the community this chart, a coaching tree chart, and said, I want you to start tracking this. And so that you can begin to intentionally move towards that second, third, and fourth generation of multiplication in your leadership. Because when you do that, it lengthens your legacy of your life and it deepens the legacy of your life. And so, like right now, I'm working with a 19-year-old young man, phenomenal young leader. And my goal is to turn him into a reproducer over the next 6 months. And so, hey, I'll be dead and gone when he hits fourth generation. So it extends the legacy of my life in discipling leaders.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about in my book for worship leaders is the idea of what you're talking about with multiplication and leaving a legacy. And we see that in the Old Testament when it mentions the sons of Asaph, and there's just this long legacy in the Old Testament of basically worship leaders.
Wow.
And it's kind of gray as far as like what exactly sons of Asaph mean, but there's definitely a line and a legacy of multiplication there, of people just leading worship throughout history. So it's awesome. It's awesome to read that, but it's so cool to be a part of that. Like what you're saying, if you grasp that and go, this is bigger than me,
Yeah. We tend to only look at our season of leadership and go, okay, well, hey, I want to lead well in this season and I want to raise up some leaders around me. But we don't think about, hey, what happens when I leave? What happens when I transition out? Did I leave a legacy of multiplication? You'll appreciate this. One church I was working with, they reached out recently and they said, hey, we lost our worship director, but in our leadership pipeline, he had raised up 3 coaches. We're in no hurry to hire anybody because those 3 coaches have come to us and said, hey, we got this. We'll run it until we find. So none of the 3 wanted the position, but they're like, we'll keep it running. And they said the quality of their worship has maintained because the worship director did leadership development and raised these 3 people up to do what he does. And so, man, what an incredible way to honor that church in leaving, is you leave them with some leaders that can really do what he did.
And lead pastors should really heed that. And I've been in situations where I didn't have that freedom. It's like it's more important to have the person up there that's bringing it as opposed to a leader who's developing people. And I think if more leaders put value into that, they would see a lot more amazing things happening in their worship ministry at their church.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're talking about super multipliers and developers. And when I hear that term, I think work, like it takes work, it takes intentionality.
Yeah.
But I think we probably can't ignore the idea of rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one thing that gets ignored a lot, especially with us people who are driven and who are on that borderline of workaholic.
Yeah.
I heard it said that, the keeping the Sabbath is probably the most broken commandment of most church leaders.
That's so true.
And, but you had posted something about rest, and I took a note for our conversation here today. You said rest isn't a weakness. It's a strategy for sustainability.
Yeah. Very true. I heard somebody say this one time. They said, sometimes taking a nap is the most spiritual thing you can do. And we don't think about that. We don't think about rest in those terms, but God modeled rest for us. He set up a pattern of rest for us. He commanded us to rest. There are plenty of scriptures in Psalms that recommend that we rest. He built in our circadian rhythms so we could sleep, rest, and recover. And there's a lot that happens when you're resting, especially when you're sleeping. And so it's really strategic. I bought a Whoop this past year, and it tracks a lot of things about your health. But one of the things it tracks is your sleep, and are you getting into deep sleep? And every day I get a sleep quality score. I get a recovery score, and so it's telling me, am I resting enough? And the thing I love about the Whoop is when you look on your app, it has an AI coach built in.
Hmm.
So on the days where my recovery is low or my sleep is low and not good quality sleep, it will tell me, hey, like this morning, I click, hey, good morning, Mac. It's Friday. Hey, you got more rest this week than your normal Friday. This means you're more recovered and you should do this, this, and this today. Push yourself a little bit today. I love that it coaches me, but then there are other days it goes, hey, looks like you had a rough day yesterday or a bad night's sleep. You need to consider taking a nap today. And so rest is strategic because it helps you operate at optimal energy. But what a lot of us do is we push, 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 crash. Then we have to recover, then push, 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 crash. It's exactly what Moses was doing. Moses in Exodus 18, he was push, 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 push. Jethro comes in and said, Moses, what are you doing? You're stressing yourself out. You cannot sustain this. You can't sustain it. You got to put a leadership structure in place and begin to delegate and do leadership development in order to sustain the ministry that you have. All of us want to scale our ministry, but we don't ever think about in order to scale the ministry, you have to structure for scale. And then you have to change your disciplines from doing to developing. That's how you scale anything. And so, but a lot of us don't think about that. And so we need that rest. And when Moses did that, it allowed him to operate in more stress-free, restful state. I got a buddy. He puts it this way. He says, ask yourself this question: can you do what you're doing the way you're doing it for decades? It's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what a lot of us do. We lie to ourselves. We say, well, this is just a season. It's just a season. It's just a season.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, a year goes by, 2 years goes by. That's a long season. And so without rest and those high stress levels in our life, man, they chip away at our health. And one of my life verses is Deuteronomy 34:8 says Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eyes were not weak and his strength was not gone.
Mm.
Now that verse came 40 years after Exodus 18. So what it tells me is that Moses heeded Jethro's advice. He started developing leaders, which enabled him to have more of a healthy life cadence, a healthy life rhythm. And so when he got to be 120 years old, he died at full vitality and optimized health. So God did not retire him because he was worn out. He retired him because his purpose was fulfilled.
Mm.
I believe 40 years earlier, if he had not changed the structure and changed his disciplines, Deuteronomy 34:8 would say Moses died at 120 years old. His knees were achy. He had arthritis. He had high blood pressure and heart disease. But it didn't. He was full optimal health. And so that's the way I want to live my life. And I know that requires rest, which is one of the most spiritual activities you can do.
Yeah. Taking care of ourselves. I watched a documentary on Evel Knievel, and he's like the opposite of what we're talking about. So basically his concept was, God's given me this life and this body, so I'm going to use it up, and all those broken bones and surgeries. And it's almost like he was celebrating the fact that at the end of his life, he had just destroyed himself. But yeah, I think rest being a commandment, there's a reason for that, because we want to be useful and usable for God's kingdom and for the advancement of that kingdom. So when you think about church leaders, worship leaders, there's extremes. There's there's the laziness, then there's workaholics. there's consequences of not resting, but then there's benefits of a rested leader, as you know. So when you think about church leaders and worship leaders, what does that look like for us?
Yeah, I think for a worship leader, they carry a lot of, if I had to customize it to them, I would say that they probably carry a lot of stress around the performance of that weekend. And because you want it to be right, you want it to be good, you want it to be excellent, you want people to engage, you want people's hearts to be fully surrendered in that time of worship. And so you're sitting there and you're structuring the perfect worship set, and you're working with your team and trying to pull off that, all the musical stuff in a perfect way, and the technology's got to be right and all of that. And then you got people who are not clicking in on planning center and not accepting the invitation, or not showing up on, they're texting you on Saturday night, I can't make it. There's a lot of stress that comes in. And so for Sunday, it's hard. It is hard for that to be a Sabbath, And so, what is your day off? What is the day you're just going to relax and rejuvenate and refuel, and just take care of yourself and get re-energized? But I think a lot of them struggle because we're working pretty heavy on the weekend, and then boom, Monday feels like a work day, and you're just jumping back in. If you're not careful, you never take time off. You never take that rest. And so I think for them, it's that there's a lot of stress around the what could we could might call performance aspect of it.
Hmm. Yeah, there's the physical resting, which and all the above resting that we've got to take that Sabbath for, which as church leaders, that's one of the sacrifices of being a church leader is Sunday is always coming.
Yeah.
So, and we gladly do that because that's our calling in life and we love it. But at the same time, like you're saying, we have to ask ourselves the question, are we taking a Sabbath? Because obviously Sunday can't be that. So, and then even the performance aspect of it, I'm learning different rest rhythms, if you will. So my wife actually wrote a devotional called Rest Rhythms, and she's really helped me with the concept of rest, of making sure that's important in my life.
Yeah.
But what I've learned lately is it's not just physical for me too. It's like I've got to rest my mind and rest my soul and my heart
Yeah.
and do you think that some of that, is when we're not resting, do you see the correlation of us not trusting God? If it's I heard a pastor say it's if it's to be, it's up to me.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
like do you see that with a lot of church leaders that fall into that?
Yeah, I do. I think not trusting God, and that produces a high level of stress, and not trusting others also produces a high level of stress. And so, whenever I'm preaching, I prepare my soul, I prepare my mind the best I can. Okay, but I'm a perfectionist. It's never done. A sermon's never done. And it's never perfect, never perfect. And so I have to, when I just preached last Sunday, and so when I walk in that morning, I'm like, in my quiet time, I'm just like, okay, God, I've done everything I can do. With the time I was given, I've done everything I can do. Now I just have to surrender this to you, and I've got to walk in freedom. And my prayer every time, and I told Brandon this years ago when he started leading worship, I said, Brandon, before I walk on that stage, before I preach, and you can do the same thing leading worship, I just bow my head and say, God, help me to go have fun.
Mm.
Just help me go have fun. Because you know what? If it's not fun, what it's
We're
got to
not
be.
doing it right.
You're not doing it right. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right, right.
And Jesus said, "Come to me, who are weary, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me. I'm gentle and humble in heart, and you're going to find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden is light." But most of us would not say, "Oh, his yoke is easy, his burden is light on my life in ministry." We'd say, "No, ministry's heavy." Well, then, are we doing it right? Are we doing it right? And I think it's what you said. We're not depending on God for the results to work through my weaknesses. we want God to work through my perfections, not my
Mm.
weaknesses.
Mm.
So that's why when I preach, I'm just like, okay, God, I've done all I can do. Activate my gift. That's the other prayer I pray. Help me have fun and I know you've given me a gift. And so it's a grace gift. It's a spiritual gift. It's a grace gift. It's not a Mac gift. Activate that gift and help me go have fun and leave the results to you.
Mm.
But the other thing is we don't trust God. We don't also we don't trust people.
Mm.
And that wears us down and increases stress level as well. I was working with a church and working them through leadership pipeline. And I'm standing over at the pipeline chart, looking at this worship leader, his different levels of his leadership pipeline. We were talking about, okay, you're the worship director. How many coaches do you have? None. Okay, how many leaders do you have? Well, what's that mean, Mac? Well, that means let's say it means somebody can step out and actually lead worship. They can lead the team. None. Okay, how many team members you have? 25. So okay, all right. So said, all right, that's a problem. So let me ask you this: how many weekends in a year do you lead? 50, and then 2 you're on vacation, right? Yep. 2 weeks vacation. Who leads those 2 weeks? Oh, we bring somebody in from the outside. I looked down and said, that's terrible. That's a terrible answer. You're not raising, and so you're on every single week. What I tell worship leaders, you got to practice what I call strategic absence. And I put it this way, duct tape your mouth and handcuff yourself to the soundboard and stand back there and watch somebody else lead the entire service, rehearsal and everything, and watch what goes wrong, and then coach them afterwards to make some correction and feedback. But most of the time, we're gone for 2 weeks on vacation. Things go wrong. You come back, and everybody, whoo, we're glad you're back. Boy, things were terrible while you were gone. And we got to practice strategic absence, putting people up and us. Like last week, all right, this is a church I went and spoke at this past week. I took them through leadership pipeline 4 years ago. So I walk in that Sunday morning, and I knew I got to preach, and they're up there having worship rehearsal, and I'm like, I don't see the worship director. Where's he? I don't see him anywhere. And then I go in the back and to the booth to get mic'd up and all that. And this is an hour and a half early. He's not there. He's not behind the booth. He's not on the stage. And then I run into him. He's in the back room, and we're talking. I said, "Hey, are you leading worship?" "Oh, no. This is one of our coaches. She's leading today." So, oh, fantastic. She's leading rehearsal? Yep. She's leading the team? Yep. Oh, she even planned the set. She planned the whole thing. Yeah. And tech team? Oh, yeah, they got it. They're running it. He walked around and just drank coffee all day. Now, his stress level was so low.
Yeah.
Why? Because he empowered somebody else. He trusted somebody else to do it. I shot a video interview with him because I'm like, I love
Yeah.
this. More worship directors need to lead this way.
Mm.
And so I just got to get your story out there, because more guys need to do that. And but they're not. They're like,
Mhm.
hey, well, I'm paid to do this, or I'm the best one to do this. And yeah, that's not healthy. It's going to burn you out over time. And I want to go for the long haul, like
Yeah.
Moses.
Yeah. I'm learning that as we grow in our leadership, it it's not it's not manifesting in us having all the right answers, but it's learning how to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And so more and more I'm learning that, obviously following Jesus's example, he always asked questions. And I'm learning that in this phase of leadership, and just I think in this topic, I think some leaders may be sitting there trying to figure out the right answers and going, "Oh man, I don't know how I'll do this and this and this." And I just encourage you to ask the right questions right now. How do I find Sabbath? Where is that? How do I trust people? Who are those people? And just to know that you don't have to have those answers today, tomorrow, but if you keep asking those questions, the answer's going to come, right?
Yeah, they do. And one thing I would challenge everybody to is, and man, even the young people, young worship leaders, find an app for your phone, or get a Whoop or Oura Ring. There are free things out there you can use. Measure your sleep. Measure your sleep. there's so many people today are not getting good sleep. What you have to recognize is there's Sean Stevenson, he's a health guy on his podcast. He calls it junk food sleep. Junk food sleep is, yeah, you might have slept 8 hours, but it wasn't good sleep. Or you might have slept 8 hours and it was a, big fat juicy steak sleep. It was a good substantive sleep. Both were 8 hours, but one was trash sleep and one was good sleep. And you got to know, how well am I sleeping? Because a lot of people don't recognize that when you go to sleep, your brain, the cells in your brain, they shrink down about 75%. And a fluid comes in, and it's like a cleaning crew coming in to wash an office at the end of the day. So when you go to sleep, this fluid comes in and cleans out your brain cells at night. And then when you wake up in the morning, they re-expand. But what it's doing, it's detoxifying your brain. And this is why sleep is so important. You're literally detoxifying yourself. And if you're not getting good sleep, then you're going to have brain fog. You're going to have fatigue. You're going to begin to show, you're going to begin to have memory issues. You're going to have all kinds of symptoms showing up in your body because you're not getting fully recovered. And that's why I love seeing that recovery score on my Whoop, because I'm going, oh, I didn't have a good recovery. So there are days I will lay down and take a nap because I know I didn't get the good sleep I needed the night before. And so just monitoring your health like that. I got a new book that came out called Leading Yourself. And I really wrestled with this as I was choosing the chapters of what I would write about. I was like, okay, I'm going to write about how to live on mission and how to write a life mission statement, how to have emotional intelligence, how to be a team player, how to develop influence with people, how to be teachable. But there was one I kept wrestling with. I was like, I want to put it in there, but I don't know if I should. And I titled that chapter Maximizing Your Energy. And it's all about health, because I think there's so many people that are not resting, eating, moving, all those things that optimize our health. We push and work so hard that we sacrifice our health. And here's what I know. When God calls you into ministry or anything, he did not call you to sacrifice your health, and he did not call you to sacrifice your family. And those are two things that I see so many pastors laying on the altar of ministry. And so I'm going to sacrifice my family. I'm going to sacrifice my health for the sake of the gospel. And Jesus never asked you to do that. Never asked you to do that. He calls you to rest.
That's right. That's right. Well, Mac, thank you so much for encouraging us on the importance of rest today. And I hope that everyone listening to this will make it a discipline and make it a goal and actually work at resting in their life and their ministry. So thanks again, Mac.
You're welcome. Great to be with you today.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please add this to your podcast list, review it, and share it with others. And don't forget about Gary's books, More Than a Worship Leader and More Than a Band, available on Amazon today.